I need a mic?
Yeah, because they're recording it.
All right. You ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Ms. Applebaum. I wanted to welcome you tonight. We had a couple of remarks to start us out. We are filming tonight, and there is a YouTube, hopefully, video of it for to be viewed later, what we shared with the students. About 5 years ago, Mr. Bernstein and I realized, by informally speaking with students, that they were no longer studying the Holocaust. In fact, more than once, students asked us what it was. Alarmed, we did some research and found that Holocaust education was indeed on the decline worldwide at the precise time that bigotry, hate speech, and dogmatism were on the rise. As Winston Churchill said, paraphrasing Santayana, those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. He said this in a speech in 1948, shortly on the heels of World War II. But Mr. Bernstein and I are firm believers that education alone can render students feeling helpless. Rather than enshrine knowledge, we wanted students to see how art had been and continues to be a tool of peaceful empowerment. Tonight you'll see and hear memorials to relatives designed to put a face on this tragedy and all attacks against members of any community. You will experience moving snapshots that crystallize and rematerialize what happened only 75 years ago. And you will hear cries of never again, figuratively etched in the work of our inventive students. Yes, we want you to learn things you may not have known, but we would also like you to take away a sense of loss, an awareness of what disappears when we, as a collective, are at our worst. Finally, we want you to know how audacious hope is, and that hope lived between the cracks of chimneys in the death camps, and hope is mighty and well-nourished in this class of historians/artists/activists. I would also like to take a moment to recognize my teaching partner, Mr. Bernstein, my fellow traveler on this journey. It's been a profound pleasure to once again teach this course with my good friend and colleague, and I would like to honor him with a new release on the powerful women of the Jewish resistance. I hope he adds this to his ever-growing library and body of evidence that human dignity and perseverance pitted against evil will eventually prevail. Mr. Bernstein. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know she was going to do that. Thank you. Thank you. So tonight, we're very excited to have the opportunity to hear from each student directly about the work that they have created and the thought behind it. For those students who have created poetry, you will also be able to hear the poem aloud. And after all 14 students here tonight have shared, we will again have the opportunity, as we had while we were getting all ready, to walk around the room, spend more time with the art. We encourage you to give feedback, to reflect on the different papers around the room, to share your closing thoughts on the large sheet outside the door, so that you can share with these wonderful artists what you're taking away from this gallery. Before we begin the gallery, a good deal of thanks is in order. First, thanks to all of you for being here with us tonight. It truly means a lot, and it makes it all the more special. The gallery would not have been possible without the support of so many individuals, and there are too many to name, but we're going to name a few. We are deeply, deeply grateful to Glenn Cummings, to Derek Pierce, to Adam Tuchinski, Stephen Gregory, Alan Wardwell, Stuart Croft, Silvio Morales, and so many others from Casco Bay High School and USM for all they have done to make tonight a reality. We would like to say a special thank you to two experts who worked with us at various points of the semester to offer wisdom, guidance, and feedback. Our expert poet, Martin Steingesser, and our expert visual artist, Alex Taraski. Martin and Alex's dedication and generosity of time and spirit has been profound and has greatly impacted the quality of the work that we see tonight. And last, but certainly not least, our deepest gratitude must be reserved for this incredible group of students. You're going to hear from them tonight, and we have had the privilege of working with them for this entire semester. And each time we have seen them, they have brought thoughtfulness, compassion, curiosity, and tenacity to our study of art and genocide. They've asked excellent questions, analyzed hard histories, supported one another, and engaged courageously in the creative process. They've become not just students, but also artists and activists, and we could not be more proud of them or more excited about the work that they have created. So, to our students in the room, thank you, all of you, truly, for showing up and taking part in combating genocide through your work. Now, that's enough out of me. I'm not the one you came to see tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Haley, who has our first piece of the night.
Okay, so my name is Haley, and I wrote a poem. I'm going to be presenting some sort of a visual montage of images that go with what I'm reading. And my general theme of this is dehumanization. Do I speak into this? Yes. Okay. Is it okay if because I have the thing in one hand? Okay. So the title of it is, obviously, This Is Not a Man. So piece by piece, stripped of years of all positivity. Positivity from connection and external support. Positivity from self-worth and spiritual belief. An entire race, a race convinced that they were less than, so far below societal consideration, nearly non-existent. 174, 517. Stripped of a name. Stripped of all consideration, all natural rights, all positivity. Dehumanization, the stripping of positive human qualities. Removal of all mutual respect or value in any human interaction. Public degradation. Public humiliation. Isolation. Persecuted for a belief in a higher power by people who believed that they were one. Minuscule rays of hope covered faster than they could be cherished. People deciding that other people mean less or are meaningless. Violence, murder, dehumanization. Opposition and rebellion. Liberation from a war that came too many years too late with very limited survivors. Primo Levi. Reclaiming of names, so that's the end. But no, it's not the end. Gradual humanization. A survivor's return to slow reality. Leading to the search for universal justice. Years later, still searching for that universal justice. Watching repeated behavior, noticing the dehumanization. The removal of all mutual respect and value in a human interaction. Public degradation, public humiliation, isolation. Preaches of never forget, as it's forgotten. Preaches of never again, as the dehumanization begins. So now I'm going to read my artist statement. Yeah, to explain a little bit of the background that went on here. So I built this piece surrounding the theme of dehumanization seen in the Holocaust. While there were many ways in which Jewish prisoners were dehumanized, I highlighted the strategies that clearly stood out in my learning of the history before, during, and after the Holocaust. These are public degradation, public humiliation, and isolation. I incorporated those themes into my art by reflecting examples on my slides, as you just saw, while speaking of each aspect. For the dehumanizing strategy of public degradation, I use examples from Kristallnacht, or also known as the Night of Broken Glass, a night during which Germans publicly degraded Jews by destroying synagogues and Jewish businesses. This enforced the narrative that Jewish citizens were already enduring. For public humiliation, I used race defilement to illustrate the ways in which it dehumanized Jews. Race defilement was the term used when Aryans had relations with someone of the Jewish race. Finally, for isolation, I use the example of Cuba refusing to allow Jewish refugees into the country for their safety. A group of Jewish refugees fleeing persecution in Germany sailed on the St. Louis to Cuba and were denied at the entry, sending them right back to the terrors of what was previously their home. The degree at which dehumanization stripped entire lifetimes away from Jewish prisoners is extremely intense. I wanted to represent this in my piece, so the slides also represent what the life of a Jew during this period would consist of. These images that you saw are moments that they were forced to endure, and these stories are something that they were there to witness. Jews endured the content of these images daily. I also wanted this piece to express how dark their lives were, with no hope, nothing to look forward to. That is seen in the color scheme. Dark gray is used up until the Bauhaus and Gertrude Bablinska slide, which was the opposition and rebellion, where it transforms to a lighter color. This was done purposefully, to signify a change in the darkness, a mark of some hope that Jewish prisoners could finally grab onto. The title, This Is Not a Man, is a play on Primo Levi's If This Was a Man, and it is intended to describe that the ways in which Jewish prisoners lived were unnatural at the least and should never be excused, as there is nothing in this world that can excuse that type of treatment. I chose to write a poem because I felt that verbally was the best way to express the dehumanization of Jews during the Holocaust. The pictures are there to support what I am saying and to provide examples of the content, but the poem is written for a deeper explanation of what was truly going on. Dehumanization was the most intense strategy that the Nazi Party utilized in an attempt to get Jews exactly where they wanted them, both mentally and physically. Decades of dehumanization followed liberation, while prisoners attempted to learn how to exist in such a state of trauma. My hope for this piece is that it causes people to continue to acknowledge the severity of the mental torture that Jews experienced during the Holocaust.
Sink into your corner. Hello, my name is Kata Marie Wilson, and my piece is called Faceless. My art piece, Faceless, is a depiction of the mass generalization of Jewish people during the Holocaust. The Holocaust was a mass murder of European Jewish people committed by the Nazis during World War II. An estimated 6 million Jews died in concentration camps and labor camps from 1941 to 1945, when the last of the camps was liberated by the Allies at the end of World War II. The Star of David behind the person, as well as on their chest, is the identification of someone who is lesser than the German peoples. It not only represents hate towards another culture, it represents the erasing of a person's identity as an individual, not just someone who is part of a certain race or religion. The person remains faceless as they do not have an identity other than being a Jew. I took inspiration from Simon Wiesenthal's book, The Sunflower, in the scene where Simon comes face to face with a dying Nazi called Karl, asking him for forgiveness for his sins so he may die in peace and go to heaven. Karl is asking for forgiveness from all the Jews, from Simon, for his atrocities to the people. In this action, he is not only putting the death of hundreds of people in Simon's hands, but he is minimizing the Jewish people who he has killed into one person who is not even there and has no relation to the people he has killed other than that he is a person of the Jewish faith. With this work of art, I hope to bring awareness to the generalizations of Jewish people and those who follow the Jewish faith throughout World War II.
Hi, my name is Simone, and I created this sculpture as a memorial to people that died in the Holocaust. It's called Paper Flowers, and I guess the title's pretty clear why. I created this from mainly materials that I found in my backyard. I grew up on Peaks Island, and on Peaks, a lot of the land was used as a military base during World War II, so I thought that it was really interesting to take materials like this barbed wire that was actually used in the time that the Jewish people were being oppressed and held in concentration camps and being brutally murdered. So I decided to take all of the materials that I found and create a sculpture to represent rebirth and growth after trauma, hardship, and death. I also wanted to use flowers in my piece because as we read books and poems in the class, I noticed that flowers were a common theme that kept occurring. They were used over and over to memorialize and symbolize people that had died, but then also as hope. In one poem that we read called Wasteland, it described flowers growing out of the battlefields and muddy graves. And I thought that that image was pretty brutal, but also really beautiful. And I also included a butterfly because that was another symbol that I noticed a lot in the books and poems that we read. And that's kind of another symbol. Well, in a few poems that we read, it was a symbol of loss of hope because the butterfly would leave, and that was sort of like life was over. It was like gone. But I made it so the butterfly was sort of coming back to represent maybe some of that hope, life, or memory being restored through this memorial.
Hello everyone, my name's Quinn Bolster, and this is my piece entitled Agnes and Her Mother. This is a painting of Agnes Gertrude Wohl, her maiden name is Mendelowitz, and her mother. The focal point of this painting is the portrait because the goal of this piece is to recognize the humanity of both the Mendelowitz and every person affected by genocide. Providing faces to the massive numbers given when discussing the Holocaust and other genocides is a way to combat the dehumanization persecutors try so hard to cultivate. This picture was taken for false identification and is the last picture taken of Agnes and her mother. Using an image taken in such terrible circumstances as a way to show humanity serves to change the narrative. Nazis aimed to destroy Jewish life completely, and reusing an image that used to represent fear to instead represent humanity can disrupt this destruction. In 1944, Agnes was forced into an overpopulated Hungarian ghetto. Shortly thereafter, her family went through a terrifying and rapid change in environment, being forced to live in a basement with 60 other people. In January of 1945, the Nazis in Hungary found this basement, and Agnes and her mother were forced into Nazi headquarters. The war would end the following September, and the Nazis had begun trying to kill as many Jewish people as possible out of desperation. Soon after being moved to Nazi headquarters, the Nazis killed Agnes's mother. Agnes escaped after being shot in the shoulder and was able to reunite with her father and brother later. She was 11 years old. The background of this piece represents the chaos Agnes experienced, and each single design represents a facet of her story. The way Agnes highlighted small moments in her story was striking, and to illustrate that, I created contrast between dark backgrounds and lighter colors. For instance, Agnes's grandmother baked her family bread before they were forced out of the ghetto. The bright orange and yellow surrounding Agnes and her mother represents this bread and the joy it provided in a dark time. I was particularly drawn to Agnes's story due to the shocking nature, but also due to the loss of her mother. I was able to empathize with this specific portion of her story, which helped me realize my greatest takeaway from studying genocide. Genocides are not as far as they may seem. Being able to connect to something that had seemed so distant from me due to time has helped me understand the importance of learning from the Holocaust. Once we understand what we can learn from genocide, we will be able to prevent current and future genocide. Just under 2 months ago, a genocide was declared in Myanmar. Genocide is not a thing of the past, and we must learn from the horrific tragedy that is the Holocaust.
Hi, my name's Maggie Ellis. This is my piece, Where There is Death, There is Life. It's made out of air dry clay, and I painted it with acrylic paint. I created my sculptural piece to act as a memorial for the victims of the Holocaust. My sculpture depicts a dead victim of the Holocaust laying down with flowers growing from his chest. This has a couple of interpretations that I attribute to it. I wanted it to be pretty open to your own interpretation. But the first that I had taken away was that the flowers are representative of the resilience and perseverance of the victims. Though many lives were lost or changed forever because of the Holocaust, many people continue to live and thrive. These people and their spirits will always remain present in a sense. I wanted to emphasize that not everything was taken from these people by the Nazis. Additionally, the sculpture represents the idea that we cannot view the Holocaust as something in the past. This line of thinking can only breed susceptibility. Events like the Holocaust can happen again, and we have to remember that these ideals and even practices continue on. In this interpretation, the flowers represent the idea that though this particular genocide was in the past, ideals originating from this time continue to exist. This piece was partially inspired by the poem The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, where the phrase "April is the cruelest month" is used to describe the time in which the ground thawed after the winter and all of the dead bodies who had been previously killed became visible. My piece incorporates a similar idea of bodies being returned back into the earth and to nature. Additionally, I was inspired by the book The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal. In this book, the author notices and grapples with the fact that the sunflowers were placed on graves of Nazis who had passed. He questions why the dead Jewish people were not given sunflowers. I incorporated this connection drawn between flowers and death into my sculpture as well. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ahmed Hassan, and my piece right here is called Memento. So basically, this piece is a sculpture and a memorial of those who have passed in the Holocaust, and I want to share their stories. So the first person here I'm remembering is named Elie Wiesel. When he was 15 years old, he was taken to a concentration camp, and he had the unimaginable and unthinkable happen to him. His humanity was stripped right from him. And as he watched countless of people die around him, he watched countless people die around him, and he decided that he wanted to share the story. So he wrote a book called The Night, and now it's one of the most famous books about a survival from the Holocaust. And okay. The second person I'm remembering is Sophie and Han Troll. Both of these people are members of the White Rose, and this is a group that it's a Nazi resistance group, and they basically spread information about what Hitler's really doing, and yeah, they had a lot of popularity, but sadly they were found out by this Gustavo, and they were both executed. The third person I decided to memorialize was Anne Frank. She was a teenager during the Holocaust and had to go into hiding. And basically, she hid in this annex with her family, and she wrote in her journal, and it was called The Journal of Anne Frank. And it's a very popular book that was published in 1952, and it told the story of her and how she recalled the Holocaust. And sadly, her and her family was found, and she was taken to Auschwitz, and that's when she passed. The last person I'm remembering is the forger. This was a man who spent his life trying to save people. He forged fake documents and passports so all these kids and men and women could escape. And he tried to save lives every day. And he had a really nice quote I liked. He said that every hour I sleep, 30 people die, and that really affected me because he thought sleep was a bad thing, because if you slept, more people would die. I don't know, that's really sad. Yeah, and to finish it off, I have a little poem, and I said, "This piece is called Memento, to signify the anguish and the pain. All these victims will never see the light of tomorrow, and the stories are the only thing that remains."
Hello, my name is Asha Osman, and I wrote a poem, and it's titled As I Sit Here. As I sit here today, I think of how lucky I am, being able to practice what is true to my heart. As I sit here, I am part of a community. But as I sit here, my body fills with tears inside. How can I just sit here while I watch others being tortured? As I sit here, families are being separated. People are being stripped of who they are and what they believe in. Having the ability to wear my hijab and be who I am while others cannot. I cannot sit here and be silent when I know others aren't so fortunate. I will not sit here. I have to stand. Stand here and fight for those that cannot be heard. As I stand here, I keep them in my prayers. Allahul Rahmanur Rahim. And my poem was about the Uyghur Muslims, like the genocide that's happening right now. And it was just through like my point of view as a Muslim, like here, safe, and how like people are being killed for like being like me. And it just made me feel so like hopeless, helpless. So in my poem, I start off like with all lowercase because to show like how I was feeling, and then at the end I start capitalizing, and I was inspired by the poem. I was inspired by the people that were writing poetry and artwork as a form of resistance in the Holocaust, and yeah.
Hi, my name is Mira, and this is my piece entitled Never Again. I was inspired actually by the course descriptor of this class. The opening line was "Never again was the cry of the world after the Holocaust." And as someone who is alive and also kind of into current events, and I've taken Mr. Bernstein's social studies class, so I'm aware of the things that are going on, and it's hard to say never again when you see warning signs of the same things that happened in 1940s Germany happening all over the world, even in America today. So that's kind of what my piece is meant to emulate. And so I did a collage. You can see newspaper articles from both recent years and the 1940s that have either similar headlines or similar themes, intermittent with these kind of like torn off photographs, which I found online, of 1940s Germany, but above it is these modern photographs torn away to reveal the parallels beneath them. So I have up here, this is a picture which you can't really tell of a Ukrainian child and her mother escaping in a train station. And here's English people doing the same thing during World War II. And then this is a photograph of someone being arrested for protesting in Russia with an elderly woman in Germany doing the same thing. And coincidentally, the Ukraine invasion happened similarly to when this class started, so that is a major theme. But there are also other things. This is a detention center a couple of years ago in America, and then a similar kind of fence thing happening in a ghetto. And then we have the January 6th insurrection with the beer hall push, because I think that it just kind of emulates how terrifying it is that an entire group of people would be willing to try to overtake their government for one man because they believe in one man's belief more than they believe in their entire country. And then we have a little girl in bombed Kiev next to children in England in a part of their country which had also been bombed. And then up in the top left corner is Uyghur Muslims in a concentration camp combined with people in a concentration camp in Germany. So it's just kind of to highlight the fact that we say never again, but governments who say that and who fund memorials and sell merchandise at those memorials don't try to prevent it from happening again, even within their own country. So that is my piece.
Hi, my name is Farhia Bukhar, and I wrote a poem. It is titled, My Home Awaits Me. Now I feel there is a pit at the bottom of my stomach where uncertainty lies. It wasn't like this at one time, when the color of your eyes didn't determine you a crime, when the very basis of who you are wasn't criticized or a reason to be brutalized. Thrown into a crowded room, anxiety overwhelms me. The sound of a beating drum fills my ears. It's my heartbeat. My heart knows, and my eyes, oh how I wish I could wash them. They have rotten at the sight of my people, who have got the faces of my mother and father, sisters and brothers. They won't be forgotten. Now fear is lodged in my throat, and I cannot breathe. Panting helplessly, but no one can hear me. Now I see, what was once my home is now unrecognizable. This piece is a poem about the Somaliland genocide towards the Issac clan. The Somali leader, Siad Barre, was against them fighting for their independence. More than 40,000 people were killed, and around 300,000 people fled to neighboring countries to seek asylum. Because of this genocide, it had led to the ongoing conflict between the landers and the Somali people. This genocide is not one that is heard about often, but it is worth learning about. We are in no position to be judging which one was worse, only to equally hear people's stories who experienced such a crime.
Hello, my name is Andrew Box, and my art piece is called Our Collective World. Has a mirror in the middle of it and markers on it across the globe where genocides have happened. I will read the artist statement. A globe is the world, a small replica of our planet we are a part of and inhabit. When looking at a globe, all I can see is the painful red wounds left from the slaughter of our people during genocides. My art piece shows the unrest these genocides have brought me. The color black is a void, a place that can consist of anything or everything covered by darkness. Red represents the sharp daggers that seize your attention. These are the spots where meaning lies. In the art piece in front of you, these red markers are where genocides have occurred. Genocides are the worst of human nature, the moment where we are devalued and murdered by others of ourselves. Within these red points in our history are the yellow marks of resistance. Victims' resistance against perpetrators, discrimination, and dehumanization show the fight for equality among all humankind. The resistance against oppressors is extremely important to acknowledge because it shows how people need to acquire freedom. The mirror represents our ability to be part of the resistance. The preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind and the advent of a world which human beings shall enjoy freedom. Acknowledged in this passage of the UDHR is the fact that all human beings deserve to be free, and that this freedom has been challenged by genocides. The large impact that these genocides have on humanity can be best seen through examples. The Holocaust is a focal point of human history, showing that atrocities can happen if people don't step up. The Nazi Party used anti-Semitism to gain power and strength within Germany. From these roots of racism came ghettos and extermination camps, taking humanity away from these people and enacting mass murder. During the Holocaust, while Jews were being discriminated against and segregated, the people in Germany and the powers outside of Germany ignored this infringement on human rights. In fact, the reason the Allied powers went to war with Germany in the first place was because of their invasion of Poland, not the mistreatment and slaughter of Jewish people. What my artwork is primarily pointing out is the responsibility we have to fight these genocides. Our lack of interference when unspeakable events like this happen allows perpetrators to gain power. For example, the Rwanda genocide of 1994 was broadcasted as international news and yet had little opposition from outside groups. If we have done more, we could have prevented genocide. It is the citizens' collective responsibility to get our governments involved. The press and public support has clearly contributed to the U.S. decision to send aid to Ukraine. We, as citizens, need to recognize our power to make a difference. That is a reason there is a mirror in the globe to signify your part in the battle against genocides. Thank you.
Suicide or genocide? My family's Sophia choice. Leo never said goodbye the day his mother died. The day she had to make her choice, suicide or genocide. And Leo never said goodbye the day his grandpa died. The day he had to make his choice, suicide or genocide. Leon was a boy of 12 when he endured this hell. I now proudly bear his name, his story I must tell. Looking out the window, fear filled Sophia's sky. Leon, my lion, turn away. Don't watch your mother cry. On the 29th of May, Leon's mother made her choice. Nazis can take my property, but not my Jewish voice. I'll jump from this 6th-floor window, this my final act, suicide before genocide, like the heroes of Masada. Leon never said goodbye the day his mother died, the day she had to make her choice, suicide or genocide. Leon's grandpa was a scholar, the wisest in Sofia. They burned his Jewish library to add insult to injury. At the train station to Treblinka, he had to make a choice. He took a rope and hung himself. There's no point in living without family. Leon never said goodbye the day his grandpa died, the day he had to make his choice, suicide or genocide. They say Leon was lucky, expelled to Kundastil, the mountains of Bulgaria, a work camp on the border. Work didn't make him free, but it did keep him alive. 100 grams of bread a day, a ditch of dirty water. Leon became a skeleton. Still, they said, work harder. Why do they make us make this choice, suicide or genocide? They say because Zid tu Osust, the Jew, he is a cheater, the butcher who puts dead rats in your meat, a fraudster and a monster, the cowman who waters down your milk, a swindler and a liar, the baker who kneads dough with his feet, stomping ants for you to eat. Zid tu Osust, the Yid, he is a cheat. My name is John Leon Rupert. I am named after my grandfather, Leon Avigdori, a Jew born in Sofia, Bulgaria in 1930. On May 15, 1943, Bulgaria announced that all Jews would be expelled from Sofia on May 31st. Each person was allowed one bag. All money, jewelry, and other property was confiscated. What authorities did not say was that all able-bodied Jews would be sent to forced labor camps, all others to the Nazi death camp at Treblinka. When the day of deportation arrived, Leon's mother's soul made her choice. She chose suicide over genocide. She jumped from a 6th-floor window to her death. 12-year-old Leon was sent to a work camp in Kundastil, the railway station where Jews were sent to Treblinka. 2 days later, his grandfather Benjamin arrived at Kundastil. When told his family had been taken to Treblinka, he too made a choice. He chose suicide over genocide. He went into the forest and hanged himself. Leon spent 15 months at Kundastil surviving on 100 grams of bread a day. When the Soviet army arrived and liberated the Jews, Leon described himself as a skeleton. My poem incorporates the key elements of this family story. I wrote the poem to honor the memories of my grandfather, my great-grandmother, and my great-great-grandfather. The verses attempt to capture each of their perspectives when facing the Holocaust. Their choices illustrate a unique form of resistance to genocide, a final act of defiance, suicide. The poem makes reference to the heroes of Masada, the 900 Jews who in 74 AD during the Jewish-Roman War chose mass suicide by jumping from a cliff rather than surrender. The poem is mounted on a glass window to recreate the scene in Sofia where my great-grandmother made her choice. My purpose in this display is to generate empathy for the personal anguish experienced by Jews during the Holocaust. Historical photos help the reader to visualize the story. The anti-Semitic poster Zid tu Osust, the Jew is a cheat, is from 1941 and serves as a warning to our generation of the dangerous consequences of lies and disinformation.
name is Olivia. My piece is called Before My Eyes. This sculpture represents the concept of being a witness to dehumanization and violent systematic oppression. This piece is interactive to further instill this idea for the viewer through the immersive experience. The 3 panels represent the 3 ways to be a witness: victim, perpetrator, and passive bystander. The eyes can be interpreted at least 3 ways: the eyes that looked the other way and did nothing, the eyes that saw and did nothing, the eyes that saw and could do nothing. The message of this piece speaks to this trinity and the way the world was stuck in horrified shock at the atrocities committed by the Nazis. The drawn figures depict the Auschwitz death march and represent the perpetrators' complete disregard for human life. The smoke at the top represents both the crematorium through which the Nazis hid their crimes and also the fog of uncertainty drawn over the Jewish prisoners by lack of information, leaving them to stay in the dark about survival in the concentration camps. The nature of the veil represents how victims endured severe dehumanization and violence, making some lose their sense of being a human, and the disassociation that came with experiencing that dehumanization. I hope that this piece serves as a reminder to act against oppression and totalitarian regimes, to never again be stuck in the role of witness, and to never replicate the past.
Approaching tragedy. Although the sky is radiating with beauty, atrocities still happen under a clear blue sky. To be ready is our duty, and to beware of the signs of terror nearby. The aggressive nations, the prioritizing peace over justice, the lies. So many lies. We should never have to segregate, but homes were left without a goodbye. Unprepared are those who debate. Keep an eye out for the lie. Don't fall for the bait. This is needed to avoid previous fates. It is a much needed trait. Beware of the darkness that always awaits. The fear of a mass killing of humans is held by all. True expansion of the mind allows for those emotions. Some need their morals to be reinstalled. Remember, time is always in motion, so it's necessary for the decisions to be the right call. The selfish desire to preserve peace is what initiates tragedies much worse than nightfall. Morals control the righteousness of decisions. Fear the darkness, but don't allow it to control you. Let fear drive you and keep your senses sharp. Justice and equality shall dominate. The bomb of sorrow cannot be allowed to detonate. Approaching tragedy by Amin. My piece is about genocide prevention and represents the possibility of danger. It uses the darkness around the poem to show the danger is always lurking. This piece is meant to convey the need to be alert. The way I do this is by showing signs that I picked up from history, the key points in history. For example, I use the lines like the aggressive nations and the prioritizing peace over justice, because these signs are always shown in the wake of a genocide. And I also used my poem and I put on a canvas. For the reason I did this is because I wanted the poem to be the light and to be surrounded by darkness, because danger is always lurking, as as genocide is always still around, and that we cannot be hiding from it. And we need to be able to, we need to be ready to be. We need the resolve to be ready for what could happen. Anyway. All right, and I also use lines like, "But homes were left without a goodbye," and I did this because I was inspired by a genocide in Cambodia, and the survivor said, "The rogue ordered us to leave the city for 3 hours. To leave the city 3 hours only. To carry nothing with us, I left my house with my mother, my 2 daughters, 3 sisters, and 2 brothers. 5 hours passed, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Realized by now this was a trip with no return. Even now, this is needed. Genocide is still happening, and we are still not yet armed with the resolve and the insight we need to handle it.
I'm reading this for Fiona Nichols, who couldn't be here tonight, who is also my daughter. Definitions of Light by Fiona Nichols. This painting represents the oppression during the Holocaust and then the outcome after the Holocaust ended. The man on the right side of the painting is depicted as a prisoner in the concentration camp. He has the yellow Jewish star pinned to his jacket showing he's Jewish. He is trapped behind barbed wire without freedom of speech and stripped of humanity. The sunflower on the left-hand corner of the painting is painted because I wanted to show how a sunflower was planted above German soldiers' graves. I wanted to show how these German soldiers were given, even in death, a memorial of a flower, and how the Jewish prisoners were buried in mass graves. This shows that a German life was valued much more than a Jewish life, for Jewish people were dehumanized to the point that even in death, they were treated like an animal. I wanted to also shed an aspect of hope in the painting, so I put the United Nations definition of genocide to show what came out of the Holocaust, to help prevent a genocide like this from ever happening again. The definition is also sliced with barbed wire, for even through hard effort, many genocides have occurred since the UN definition of genocide was written. The prisoner is still separated from the definition of genocide to show that the definition came after his oppression. Although there was a lot of oppression during the Holocaust, there were also many people who resisted. One example of resistance was a group of anti-Nazi writers who called themselves the White Rose. The group was made of 5 students named Hans Scholl, Alexander Schmorl, Willy Graf, Christoph Probst, and Sophie Scholl. They created anti-Nazi left leaflets to spread awareness to the public as to what was going on in the concentration camps. They knew if they were caught, they would likely die. They were arrested by the Gestapo in 1943, their resistance coming to an end. The changes they made live on. In my painting, I show a man with barbed wire running around his face. Although he's a prisoner, he also represents others silenced for speaking against Nazi policies and silenced because of who they are. The White Rose dared to speak up against the Holocaust, but they were too silenced, which is a theme in my art, where barbed wire separates the man from his right to speech and freedom. This painting is meant to show the oppression of the past while also shedding a light on the changes made and hope for the future. When we learn about these kinds of genocides, we can learn about present genocides and how to prevent them. I hope my art can show the changes made after genocide is perpetuated and inspire others to keep making changes to prevent a genocide from happening again.
Hello. My name is Danielle Purington Kane, and this is my artwork. My artwork has a title that's written in Hebrew. It's pronounced Kuma, and it roughly translates to rebirth, revival, resistance, recovery. And I chose that title because my piece is a memorial to the Holocaust survivors and lives lost in concentration camps, gas chambers, and mass murders by what's called Einsatzgruppen. My art is made up of many layers, just as all victims and survivors of genocide are humans made up of multiple layers. So I'll just talk about some of the layers. As you've heard from some of my colleagues, often a sunflower was planted on German graves of Nazi soldiers. And so I put the Star of David inside the sunflower so that we could empower those Jewish people that were not given proper burials. And then you'll also see some smaller flowers, and that is representing rebirth, as well as recovery that can be found in people sharing their stories. And then at the bottom, those are all empty bullet shells to memorialize people that were killed by Einsatzgruppen, which were Nazi mobile paramilitary death squads. And so they would just line people up and shoot them into ditches. So I really wanted to memorialize those people by giving them the flowers. And then in the back, there's the uniform that prisoners were forced to wear, because they were dehumanized, they were killed in the camps, but they were also, their spirits were taken away. And then there is a little bit of resistance in this piece as well. If you look really closely, you can see there's a secret pocket, because the prisoners, they used to sew a secret pocket inside their uniforms to smuggle like bread or a pencil. So I did that to tribute to their courage. So yeah, that's my artwork.
Thank you so much. Can we get one more round of applause for these amazing students, please? And in a moment, I'm going to turn the mic over to two special guests, Adam Tuchinski and Derek Pierce, who have been gracious enough to join us tonight. Thank you for being here. They've both been instrumental in making this course possible. But I realized that earlier when I spoke, I did not name something because it has become so blatantly obvious to me in my life, which is that Leslie Applebaum is a force for good in this world. Please give her a round of applause. It has honestly gotten to the point where it's just like breathing for me to be like, oh, Leslie did something else amazing today. Leslie, please know it's been such a pleasure, and there's nothing I've loved more than working with you, so thank you for everything. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Derek Pierce from Casco Bay High School to share a few thoughts, and after which he will pass it off to Adam Tuchinski from USM to share some closing thoughts as well.
Thanks. Give it up for Mr. Bernstein and Ms. Applebaum. And first, I'm so grateful to USM for welcoming us here tonight and kind of amplifying our students' voices and work. We have been so fortunate to have the university here in the Portland community and offering these opportunities for our kids at Casco Bay to go deeper and farther in their thinking and work. And it's awesome. Thank you, fabulous USM students, for being patient and having high school students in your classes and for modeling the way with truly splendid work tonight. And then I want to thank the students for helping us understand why we need to get out of bed in the morning and do what we do and do the important work of trying to move this world forward and farther and helping us what we need to hold on to in both the tragedy that is and the incredible suffering that is told through these stories, but also the incredible resistance and hope that somehow emerges in the place where hope seems least possible. So I am so grateful for what I learned tonight from each of the students here and for the life force that I know they will take with them in their days moving forward, and that I know I will as being fortunate enough to be in the audience. So thank you, guys. I'll pass it over.
Thank you, Principal Pierce. And my name is Adam Tuchinski, and I'm the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences here at USM. And I'm delighted to be here tonight to kind of honor and witness this partnership between Casco Bay High School and the University of Southern Maine. I'm really proud of everything that's happened tonight. I want to thank Ms. Applebaum and Mr. Bernstein. I'd like to also applaud them. One of my responsibilities in the college is to oversee our music program, and when I talk to people in musical theater, when we're not making fun of it as a discipline often, they often explain to me that in musical theater, when you're feeling emotions in a play and the emotions become so powerful, it's the moment in musical theater when you kind of break into song. And the thing I find so impressive about everything you did here today is that you combine kind of words and history, but also you capture those things in art as well. And bringing those things together, I didn't really think was possible. And talking to Leslie beforehand, every time she does this, she doesn't really think it's possible, and then you blow their minds. So congratulations to you and to all of you and your families. You have a lot to be proud of. I am an historian. I don't want to take up too much time, but one thing I do want to say before we go is the theme of this course is never forget. And that's always very important, and I'm just so impressed by the way so many of the students connected the Holocaust of the mid-20th century to later Holocausts. And so it's important not only never to forget, but how you remember is often equally important. And I think I wanted to kind of read a bit of a selection from the historian Timothy Snyder, probably one of the most notable historians of the Holocaust for a number of different reasons. But one of the things he tried to do, Leslie talked about at the outset of the meeting, of the class tonight, that students aren't studying the Holocaust. But one of the things Snyder tries to do with the Holocaust is to make it a less exceptional event. Yeah, as a Jew myself, growing up in the early 1970s, it always kind of blows my mind a little bit that the distance from the Holocaust to my childhood is roughly equivalent to the distance between your lives and the Clinton administration. But one of the things Timothy Snyder tries to do here is it's easy to think of the Holocaust as a moment of a ruling ideology that is so out of character, so separated from the common flow of history, that it's something that could never happen again. But in fact, as all of your presentations show, we see it all around you. And one thing that can happen with the Holocaust is that the memory of the event itself can often cause us, I think, to ignore many of the things that are happening in front of us, because we see genocide through the lens of black and white photographs and the terrible, beautiful images of Nazis marching. But most importantly, Snyder counsels us, and this is why I was so impressed by Faria's poem here, where she talked about the way in which many of us compare Holocausts here, where we count the numbers. And in Andrew's presentation, we often don't see ourselves in these events. We see ourselves in the victims, and we don't see ourselves in the perpetrators. So if you don't mind, I just want to read a brief selection from Timothy Snyder's Bloodlands, which is a history of Eastern Europe between Stalin and Hitler. He writes, "Ideologies tempt those who reject them. Ideology, when stripped of time or partisanship of its political and economic connections, becomes a moralizing form of explanation for mass killing, one that comfortably separates the people who explain from the people who kill. It is convenient to see the perpetrators just as someone who holds the wrong idea and is therefore different for that reason. It is reassuring to ignore the importance of economics and the complications of politics, factors that might, in fact, be common to historical perpetrators and those who later contemplate their actions. It is far more inviting, at least today in the West, to identify with the victims than to understand the historical setting that they shared with perpetrators and bystanders in the Bloodlands. The identification with the victim affirms, this is the important part, a radical separation from the perpetrator. The Treblinka guard who starts the engine or the NKVD officer who pulls the trigger is not me. He is the person who kills someone like myself. Yet it is unclear whether this identification with victims brings much knowledge or whether this kind of alienation from the murderer is an ethical stance. it is not all that obvious that reducing history to morality plays makes anyone moral. So I think it's important not only to never forget, but it's important to never forget that this darkness, that evil that existed in the Holocaust is always ever present and is always close to the surface. And one of the things Timothy Snyder writes about is one of the reasons for the Holocaust was not only a dangerous ideology, but two-culture search for food, provoked perhaps by an environmental crisis. So we're always on the brink of events like this. They're happening all around us, and many of your exhibits tell that story. So when I heard you say that students haven't studied the Holocaust enough, I think what I'm delighted to see is that all of you were able to put the Holocaust into a contemporary context, because it's going on right around us all today. And like many of these sort of indifferent eyes in this installation, many of us are too busy in our day-to-day lives to even really see it or confront it or oppose it or resist it. So thank you all for your work, and thank you for this invitation. And I'm sorry to go on too long, but I just really appreciate your work and was inspired by it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we invite folks to continue spending time checking out the different pieces, getting up close and personal, chat with the artists. Definitely don't forget to fill out different feedback opportunities to let the artists know your thoughts, your reactions, the emotions that they provoked in you. We also have a paper for when you're leaving for you to record your thoughts on the gallery as a whole. And I think it's only fitting that we end with a massive round of applause for our students and artists. Thank you for creating this for us.